Hello, everyone. This is child therapist Stuart Perry. I'm an LCSW in Louisville, Kentucky. We'll get started right at 2 p.m. We've got about 1 minute until we go live. Today, I'm so excited to be talking with you about this new year and setting new parenting goals and how to really set goals for yourself and goals for your children. And we'll get started, like I said, right at 2 p.m. So make sure that you are prepared. It is 1:59. I'm so excited. It's the first ever Mister Stu's Tuesday. Just checking a couple of things here before we get going, making sure that my sound is all good. All right. And it is 2 p.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started. Like I said, my name is Stuart Perry. I go by Mister Stu. I'm a child therapist in Louisville, Kentucky, and I am the creator and founder and CEO of MisterStuTV. It's a mental health education program for kids and families. We provide mental health fun for kids, mental health resources for parents, and mental health training for professionals. And every second and fourth Tuesday, I'll be live at 2 p.m. just for 25 minutes just to go over some parenting skills and different things like that. Today, we're talking about how it's a new year and we're getting into new parenting goals. So I'm going to talk with you about some ways to set goals for your children and set goals for yourself as a parent. And then we'll also talk about how to really implement those things as the year goes on. But before we jump into that, I do have a few announcements for you. First things first, if you are in the Louisville, Kentucky area, then the third Saturday of every month, myself and my team are putting on a free pancake party in downtown Louisville at the Republic Bank Foundation YMCA. We will be there live on the third Saturdays of each month at 10 a.m. from 10 to 11 a.m. And we'll put on a program to help children and families learn about emotions. And there will also be free pancakes. So make sure that you are there if you are around in the Louisville area. You do have to have tickets to attend the event, but you can get those tickets by going to MisterStuTV.com and clicking on calendar. You'll see all of the information there. Next, there are also Mister Stu calendars. Let me show you. This is the most emotional calendar ever. And it is put out by myself and my team. Each month goes through a different emotion that teaches kids just what that emotion is and how it feels. Make sure that you pick these up. They are just $9.99 in our store at MisterStuTV.com. So go over there, make sure that you pick one up so that you don't miss out on all of the emotional fun this year. And then finally, goodness, I knocked down my statue. Finally, the final announcement that I have for you is that it would help out myself and my team tremendously if you would follow us on YouTube. We've got two channels there. It's youtube.com/@MisterStuTV. That's MisterStuTV and at MisterStuTV Parents. So it's MisterStuTV Parents. youtube.com/@MisterStuTV and youtube.com/@MisterStuTV Parents. But today we are talking about setting realistic expectations and parenting goals for the new year. And let's talk just a little bit about realistic expectations. So many times parents and caregivers will tell children to act their age, but then their expectations of those children are that the child acts far beyond their age. Let me give you an example. Like I said, I'm a child therapist here in Louisville. And there was a time when a family came in with a 4-year-old child, and their goal for that child was for the child to never throw another tantrum ever. That's just not a realistic expectation. Young children throw tantrums. As a matter of fact, it's an important part of their development for them to throw tantrums. And no, it's not fun for you or me or any of their other caregivers, but it's an important and expected part of their development. So as you're setting expectations for your child this year, start to ask yourself, are these expectations realistic? Are these expectations something that I can expect from my child? Is it something that my child can do? Or is it just something that would make my life easier? It's okay to set expectations of things that will make your life easier, make your life more fun, and make your child's life happier. But make sure that as you're setting those goals, they're things that your child can actually accomplish, not just hopes that both of you are going to get frustrated about as you try to implement those expectations. It's also important to not judge children, but help them learn from their failures. I'm not sure if you've ever watched a child blow up and try to tie a balloon, but it can be one of the most frustrating things. Oh my goodness, when a child is blowing up a balloon and then they go to try to tie it, and you can see that they just aren't doing it the way that maybe you would want them to do it. Or another thing, what if a child is putting together a puzzle and you can see where the pieces go and you want to let them do it, but it's so frustrating to watch them just barely miss where the piece goes, and it's such a frustration. But can you, in that moment, not judge your child for what they can't do yet? Or judge your child for not being able to do something the way that you would do it? But can you help them learn from mistakes, learn from failures? Learn that those things don't mean you have to give up, and also learn how to do things better in the future. Like I said, watching a child blow up a balloon can be so frustrating. You see them start to blow and their cheeks just puff out because they're not focusing their breath. But then over time, you can start to see that they blow the balloon up easier each time they do it, if you'll cheer them on as they learn, and if you'll help point out the things that they are doing properly, not just the things that they need to do differently. It's also important to remember, as you're setting expectations for your child, that not everything is a life or death situation. Recently, I had a young child in my office, and I've got the game Battleship in my office. And if you've ever seen the boards for Battleship, there's a little latch that helps you open up the board and be able to play the game. Well, this child was struggling so hard to open up the Battleship game, to the point that they started to cry. And then they looked at me with tears in their eyes and they said, "What's gonna happen if I can't get it open?" This child has been made to believe that any mistake, any failure, is one that has dire, dire consequences. When in reality, if you can't get the Battleship game open, you know what happens? Nothing. You just don't get the Battleship game open. And if you ask me for help, as a matter of fact, I can show you how to do it, and then you can do it. But not everything is life or death. So as you're setting expectations for your child, and as you're considering why you're setting different expectations, be sure that not everything comes down to life or death. Make sure that your expectations are those things that can benefit you and can benefit your child, but it doesn't have to be that if they don't meet that expectation, they need to feel bad or feel like a total failure or feel like something terrible is going to happen because they didn't meet the expectation. The next part about expectations is to remember that it's important to reward progress, not only perfection. You can reward perfection once your child achieves it, if they achieve it, but it's important to reward progress along the way. This is what is called shaping behaviors. And many times when I talk to teachers and parents, what they really want is a magic button or a magic switch that they can just press or flip, and then the child's behavior will be new and different, and there will never be any struggles. But realistically, it is on a continuum of progress. Let's take an example of a child who gets in a lot of fights at school. Well, maybe they're getting in a lot of physical fights at school, and then those things turn into shouting. And then those things turn into just talking but cursing. And then those things turn into arguments. And then those things turn into being able to be assertive without going back and forth with authority figures. Do you see how it took time? It's not just that the child goes from being in fights to calmly talking through difficult situations, but as they are progressing, how many things can you praise them for? How many things can you reward them for? If they were in physical fights, but then they just start shouting, you can praise them so big for that. Oh my goodness, you did such a good job. You didn't even try to hit anybody. And I know you got loud, but look, everybody's safe. You did such a good job. And if you'll reward that progress, then you'll start to shape behaviors. Unfortunately, in mental health, there are very few magic buttons and very few magic switches. Most of the time, it comes down to shaping those behaviors. And in order to shape behaviors, you have to be rewarding the progress as your child is learning. It's important to recognize and celebrate small achievements, tiny little things. I work a lot with children with autism spectrum disorder, and sometimes those children come to me and they are fully nonverbal, meaning that they don't speak, they don't say any words, and sometimes they don't make any sound. Sometimes they do make sounds, but they can't yet form words. Well, with a child with autism spectrum disorder who's learning with me how to speak, what I can praise them for is if they'll just make noise. If they'll just make noise, and oh my goodness, I heard you. You made the sound. Oh my goodness. And you start to reward that progress. Now, nonverbal behavior isn't always something that is controllable. Sometimes it has a lot to do with chemicals in the brain and brain functionality. But if you'll start to reward those things and you'll start to praise them, then that child's brain can start to put some pieces together. And what used to be believed as something that was impossible, taking a child who is currently nonverbal and helping them learn to speak, is now fully possible. And in different ways and in different levels, but the way to do it, regardless of the outcome, regardless of how far the child progresses or how much verbalization they can give, it all comes down to praising those little things, praising sounds, then praising noises where you can tell it's specific, then praising attempts at words, then praising words, then praising when words are put together, then praising requests, then praising when a few words are strung together in a partial sentence, then praising sentences, and then over time you've shaped the behavior. Sometimes parents of children with autism spectrum disorder get very frustrated that their child can't talk, or sometimes what they say is, my child won't talk. And I understand it can be difficult when your child is struggling with communication and you really want them to get it, but to go from not making any noise at all to taking uh, the time to form full sentences takes time. It takes effort on their part and on yours to praise that progress. The thing that I teach parents to do is to flood children with praise for the things that they want to see more of. One thing that I constantly am saying is you will always get more of what you give more attention to. So if you are wanting to see more of a behavior, flood your child with praise when they show that behavior or show signs of that behavior. And if you'll do that, then you're giving much more attention to the good things than to the negative things, because most of the time it comes down to the fact that children are dying and begging for attention. And if all the attention they're getting is negative, or if the negative attention is much easier to get than the positive attention, you'll get many more negative behaviors. But if you will flood them with praise and you will help them to understand how proud you are of the tiny little things that they're doing and the tiny little steps of progress that they're making, then you will start to see more of those things, because in the end, that's what your child really wants. They want your attention. Make sure you give attention to the things you want to see more of, because you will always get more of what you give more attention to. And I call it flooding with praise. It can be overkill. It can be to the point where maybe your child is like, oh, okay, mom, okay, dad, okay, grandma, whatever, whoever you might be to that child. They're looking around and they're like, okay, you're starting to say it a lot. That is great. You want to flood them with as much praise as you possibly can. And that's how you can shape those behaviors. One thing that I would challenge you as a parent to do with your expectations of yourself this year. We've talked some about how to implement, how to come up with appropriate expectations for your child and how to implement those expectations. But now, what about an expectation for you? What does your child expect of you? One thing I'd challenge you with this year is to focus on not making promises, but making plans. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I learned this from working at a psychiatric facility here in Louisville, Kentucky. One time during a training, there was a great trainer, and they were talking about just different strategies on working with kids. And they said, one thing we don't do here is make promises, because promises can always fall through. Even with the best of intentions, even if you feel like you have set up everything for that promise to be fulfilled, it's important to know that something can always happen. So we make plans, not promises. And if the child says, is that what we're going to do? You can say, that's the plan. Do you promise? Well, I plan for us to do this. And that way, they don't look at you as a liar or someone who can't be trusted if indeed that plan falls through. Plans can change, promises cannot. So if you'll make plans rather than promises, you're setting up your child's expectations of you to be able to be flexible in the case that something you really planned on, and maybe it was something you really wanted to do, falls through. Life is completely unpredictable. One time that I can remember in particular is when I was young. My dad actually had a heart attack on my birthday. Now imagine if there had been tons of promises made about what was going to be happening on my birthday, then not only as a young child would I be concerned about my dad, I would also be very frustrated about these promises that were made. Because as young children, it doesn't matter if you had a heart attack. You promised. So make plans, not promises. Another thing that promises do is that it signals to children that if you say something and it's not a promise, it may not be reliable. It's important that children understand that what you say is what you mean. Just like in Horton Hears a Who, Horton says, I said what I said and I meant what I meant. An elephant is faithful 100%, or something like that. Somebody might tell me I said it wrong. But That's how we should approach parenting. Whether you are a mom, a dad, a grandparent, aunt, uncle, a teacher, or just someone who works with children, it is important that children see you as someone who can be trusted. One thing that children who come into my office know is that when Mr. Stu says yes or Mr. Stu says no, that's what he means. And it doesn't matter if you ask 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, or just once. Yes means yes, no means no. And if you will implement that for yourself, then what you're doing is you're setting up expectations of your child to trust you more. If you always have to promise, or if your child looks at promises as a higher level of things, which isn't entirely wrong, but if they look at promises as, oh, well, I can trust it when they say it's a promise, but I can't always trust it when they don't say it's a promise, that's not the best way to be communicating, because then what if you tell them, no, you can't go to such and such? Then what they're thinking is, well, they didn't say they promised. So if you will start to make plans rather than promises, you'll set up expectations that you can follow through on, expectations that are flexible in case something just comes up out of the blue. And you'll be teaching your child that what you say is what you mean. What you mean is what you say, and you don't have to add a promise for it to be true. It's important to be flexible and adaptable with yourself and your child as you've set these expectations and as you're implementing the expectation. It could be that maybe you're a weekend. We are 9 days into the new year. Maybe at this point you've set some expectations for yourself and you can see that it's just not going to be doable, or it's just not something that's going to be worth it for you. Maybe you've set some goals with your child and you just see that maybe these are just not realistic things. It doesn't mean you have to throw the whole thing out. Just be a little bit more flexible with it. Like I talked about at the beginning, maybe it's not that the 4-year-old child will never have another tantrum, but maybe it's the goal. Maybe the goal is that when your child is throwing a tantrum, they're able to calm down within a certain period of time. Then over time, you can shorten that period of time. Then you may be able to decrease the frequency of those tantrums. But be flexible with your expectations and with your goals so that you and your child can be working together on them. And that's really what it's about, is about creating a partnership with you and your child working together to achieve these goals. Not just you frustrated with your child, not just your child frustrated with you, but you and your child working together. And adaptability and flexibility is what allows that to happen. Let's talk about just the main takeaways from today's session. I told you we won't take more than 25 minutes, and we're at 21 right now. The main takeaways: have high expectations for your children, but make sure those expectations are realistic, and don't be surprised when it takes time for your child to meet those expectations. Also, the second takeaway is reward progress, not just perfection. Remember, it's about shaping behaviors, not magic buttons and magic switches, but it's about shaping those behaviors. So reward progress, not just perfection. And finally, make plans rather than promises to help your child with their expectations of you. Make sure that you are implementing these strategies and send us a message at MisterStuTV if you find out that it's working really well, or if it's a big struggle. Send us your feedback and we would love to hear it. Make sure that, again, if you're in the Louisville area, you sign up and get your tickets for our pancake party at the Republic Bank Foundation YMCA. That's the third Saturday of every month from 10 to 11 a.m. You can get all the information by going to MisterStuTV.com and clicking on calendar. There you can get your free tickets. Also, MisterStuTV.com, click on store and get your most emotional calendar ever. Make sure you pick one up so that you don't miss out on all of the emotional fun this year. And then finally, be sure to subscribe to both of our YouTube channels. We've got two: MisterStuTV.com / at Mr. No, Let me redo that. YouTube.com/@MisterStuTV and YouTube.com/@MisterStuTV. Parents, make sure to like and subscribe both of those channels so you don't miss out on any of the mental health fun, resources, and training that Mister Stu TV has to offer. It's been great hanging out with you this Tuesday. Be back again in 2 weeks for the next Mister Stu's Tuesday. Remember, it's Mister Stu's Tuesdays, 2 p.m. on Tuesdays. Might as well just call them Tuesdays, 2 p.m. on Tuesdays. See you next time. Peace.